Are you surprised when you read all these briefings going on about a dinner last week?
No, absolutely not. This is the way in which Brussels impedes negotiations. What they are going to be doing for the next 2 years is pushing London towards a stance, a defensive stance, through leaks, through distortions, and through a strategy of making Theresa May fight for her right to negotiate. She will be negotiating of her right and opportunity to negotiate. There will be no real negotiations.
Right. You famously sort of recorded some of your Eurogroup meetings because the briefings were kind of... You wanted to make sure that the briefings were accurate to what you had heard in the meeting.
What's so strange about that? I had to report to Parliament.
Yeah.
I had to report to my Prime Minister, to my cabinet.
I wasn't accusing you. I was saying, but
no,
were the briefings often distorted?
This is even
they were
an
distortions.
issue.
They were distortions. The
no, there were no briefings. There
but
were no minutes. There were no
the private briefings that go off to the press afterwards.
But the main issue, as far as I was concerned, I was engaged in 10-hour-long negotiations. Then I would have to go to my Parliament and report what happened. And you know what? After 10 long, strenuous hours, the human mind slips and suddenly becomes a big haze. So not having minutes for this is the opposite of a democratic, transparent process.
Do you think Brexit is going to work out for the UK? Because you were against it at the time of the referendum.
Oh, I was against it, even though nobody can accuse me of being a lackey of Brussels.
Yeah.
My great concern for both the European Union and Britain is that our leaders, London and Brussels, are locked in a ranking of preferences which produces a bad outcome for everyone. Their power at the personal level, Theresa May's, Jean-Claude Juncker's, Angela Merkel's, is inversely proportional to the mutual advantage that we can get out of it.
What's driving the deep establishment, the European establishment, as you refer to it? Because I don't know, these are not evil people who want to put suffering around. That's not your case.
It's like a Shakespearean tragedy where everybody is trying to do their best. It's like watching King Lear, and you wonder how can these smart people be so deluded, the characters in the tragedy.
Sort of playing their role and what they think they need to do in a situation.
You've got to understand that Juncker and Merkel and the powers that be in Brussels, their greatest nightmare is a mutually advantageous agreement with Britain. Because this, in their mind, would encourage others to be uppity, to demand stuff, and possibly to get out of the EU. On the other hand, Theresa May is locked in this inanity of putting the end of freedom of movement above everything else, above the interests of British industry, of British agriculture, British universities. So this is a political coordination failure of an immense degree.
Right. Politics these days, where are you on the Liberal establishment? Because the Liberal establishment is the much persecuted group at the moment. It's not had a great couple of years. Because in many respects, you're talking about the Liberal establishment and the deep establishment are the same thing, aren't they? They're what?
Yes, they are. They are, to a very large extent. Look, they resemble these days the person who's killed his parents and he's pleading for leniency at the court on the grounds that he's an orphan. They have been extremely authoritarian, the way they dealt with us, right. The way that they're now dealing with Theresa May. They've been extremely authoritarian. They have been imposing loony economics. The idea that you take the largest loan in human history and give it to the most bankrupt state in Europe is loony economics. Yeah. So they've been doing all this, and then now that they are in retreat, they are complaining about the alternative facts, the distortions, the leaks, and the loony economics of the nationalist
Who would you vote for in the British general election now?
Oh, Jeremy Corbyn for sure.
And
I'm a leftist. You can't change your spots.
Yeah, but you're a bit of a fan of Macron in France. And he comes out of the book quite well as someone who's able to think a little bit out
of my best friends and my opponents. In the case of Britain, for instance, I think that it's madness that the Labour Party, for instance, is putting up a candidate in places like Brighton against Caroline Lucas because of the sectarianism of the Progressive Front. I wish there was a nuanced progressive alliance in Britain so that we could all vote for it. But in France, you're absolutely right. Look, I'm a leftist. What did the left do in 2002 when Le Pen Senior was pitted against Jacques Chirac? we all went behind, we rallied behind Jacques Chirac. He was an admirer of Thatcher, he is conservative, he was not at all a friend of the left. And yet, the left used to understand that binding together with liberals and even neoliberals against the fascist, racist, ultra-right was our absolute duty. Now, why have we changed that today?
Well, because the Mélenchons have lots in common with the far right, and many of his voters are going to go because they're all anti-globalisation, which is the big schism in the
I'm anti-globalisation. I'm anti-neoliberal. But above all everything else, I'm anti-racist and anti-fascist. And we should see eye to eye, you know. By the way, Macron is infinitely better than Chirac was. Macron was the only minister that I met during my tenure who actually understood the problems of authoritarianism and loony economics in Europe and who actually tried to help Greece not be crushed.
We need to leave it there. Yanis Varoufakis,
Thank you very much.
Thanks.